This is episode 15 with Caitlin McCall. Welcome to the Eco-Conscious Diver Show. I'm your host, Caitlin, PADI scuba instructor, scientific diver, and science communications specialist. I'm here to remind you that being eco-conscious is cool. Learning about the environment can be fun, and climate change isn't a dirty phrase. Each week, I'll be getting up close and personal with thought leaders from around the globe as your weekly dose of motivation so that you can create epic change in your own life and become the best version of yourself possible. Are you ready to dive? So, you want to get into the world of ocean conservation, but you're sure that you have to go back to school to get a new degree or new certification before you can start, right? And you can't even think about starting that life-changing journey until you've got them. Well, let me ease your mind. If you've got the desire, a passion for the ocean, and you're willing to put in the work to learn, Eco-Conscious Diver has the course for you. It's a brand new online course titled A Complete Introduction to Marine Conservation. This will help you start a journey that won't just change your straw preference. It could change your life too. I know what you're bringing to the table is so needed in the world of marine conservation, and I can't wait to see you in the course. Head to www.eco-consciousdiver.com to sign up and to check out all other podcast episodes, resources, and the Eco Dive Shop. This episode is packed with insight into Marine Conservation Institute's Global Blue Parks program and what it takes to be recognized. I hope you'll enjoy this podcast with Sarah Hameed from Marine Conservation Institute. Hey, Sarah, how are you doing?
I am great, Caitlin. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here today. I'm super excited to talk with you about just everything you guys have going on. But we'll start with our intro question, which is, what is your favorite marine species and why?
And I knew this was coming. It was part of the homework, but I still haven't made up my mind because the bottom line is I love the diversity of life in the sea. I love bull kelps and I love rose anemones and I love great white sharks. I love it all. But if you asked my daughters, they would probably tell you that I really get most excited about octopus. All the different kinds of octopus. They're just mind-blowing. And I've never particularly studied them. I am not an expert. I just am so fascinated by them. I mean, who wouldn't be? They're incredible. But there is also a little species of intertidal crab that has a important spot in my heart. It's a porcelain crab. Its name is Petrolisthes cinctipes. And here along the Northern California coast where I live, if you go out along the rocky coast, a couple, areas at low tide and carefully lift up a piece of cobble, you'll find these guys scurrying around. They have dark maroon, purple, stripy legs. They look like they're wearing stockings. And I have purple stripy socks, tall socks that I sometimes wear and think of myself as a Petrolisthes cinctipes. And I spent a lot of time in graduate school chasing after these guys. They were part of my research. And so maybe it's out of habit, but I still always look for these little guys and chase after them a little bit.
That's awesome. I love that you have matching socks.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Sarah is here today as the Blue Parks Director and Senior Scientist for Marine Conservation Institute. They are saving wild ocean places for us and future generations. So tell us a little bit about this project, how it came to life, and about your job.
Absolutely. So the Blue Park Awards was really a brainstorm that started kicking around Marine Conservation Institute before I joined. This was really an idea that Dr. Elliot Norse, who was the former president of Marine Conservation Institute, had. He's also considered the father of the marine conservation biology field as a field. What he noticed, or what he knew, first of all, was that marine protected areas work to safeguard marine wildlife, but they only work when they're done really well, when they're in the right places, they've got the right rules and regulations, and they've got the right management. And he also noticed that countries were getting a lot of credit for marine protected areas that did not have those attributes. That were often really just paper parks or parks on paper only, meaning that they didn't have strict regulations that were protective of marine wildlife, or they didn't have the sort of management capacity to follow through with whatever rules were on the books. So he also noticed that over the last 20 years or so, countries had gotten into this sort of competition about who could announce the biggest marine protected area in the world. And so, whether it was the US or, countries were kind of vying for these big announcements about huge marine protected areas, which was great, right? It was this competition that was resulting in more protection. But what he wanted to do was align that, government leadership interest in getting credit and that competitive spirit with doing it well, not just big areas, but good protections. Mm-hmm. And so that was where this idea for an incentive structure, an award for not just the biggest areas, but the areas that really provided good protections came about. And he started presenting and talking with folks about this idea. In fact, as a graduate student, I heard him present this idea. One of the first times he really presented this idea at an international science conference, back before I ever worked with Marine Conservation Institute. When I was joining Marine Conservation Institute, it was just as Elliot Norse was retiring, but I was really brought on to launch this idea, to make it real. And the first step of that was to look at all of the good science that has occurred, all the good science about what makes a good marine protected area. What are all those attributes of being in the right place with the right rules and the right management? Mm-hmm. So we pulled all of that information together and tried to translate it into a series of criteria that we could use to judge MPAs and identify the ones that were set up for success. And so we took that draft around to a bunch of international conferences and workshops and meetings, and met with a bunch of marine scientists and conservation experts from around the world to help to have them, look at these and help us refine them and make them better and make them, applicable and usable for identifying these outstanding marine protected areas. So in 2017, we evaluated our first marine protected areas for these awards, for these Blue Park Awards. And we announced the first 3 blue parks. At the time, we actually had a different name for the awards. It was the Global Ocean Refuge Awards. That was a bit of a mouthful, and we have renamed it since then to the Blue Park Awards. But we announced our first 3 at a big international conference. And since then, we now have 16 blue parks around the world. And we're really looking forward to adding more to that network, with the aim of getting to 30% of the global ocean, not just in marine protected areas, but in effective marine protected areas, which is the amount that scientists believe to be the amount that we need to really safeguard marine biodiversity in the ocean and avoid mass extinctions. So that is the big goal in it. And it's all about trying to leverage that interest in getting credit and prestige with these international awards that are internationally recognized for doing a great job in ocean conservation.
And I love, I saw on the website, you guys have a really awesome interactive map
Yes.
Yeah, and you can click on the different MPAs, marine protected areas, and you can see exactly where they are and everything about them. It's really interesting. That's a great map.
Oh, great. I'm glad you like that. That's
yeah.
new, that it's now clickable.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So what does it take to get this award? What are some of the, I'm sure that there's a lot of different things on the list, but if you could give us just kind of a summary of what's required.
That's right. That's right. So I do kind of, I gloss over it by saying in the right places with the right rules and the right management. That involves a lot of detail. And so to highlight a few things, when we talk about being in the right places, we're talking about being in, protecting areas that are really valuable for biodiversity, that these are often ecosystems that are highly threatened by human activities, and places that harbor a lot of species richness. We talk about the right rules, and that means they are protective enough. Too many marine protected areas get sort of counted towards various protection goals that don't have strong enough regulations to protect marine wildlife. They allow for far too many destructive activities like mining or dredging, as well as overfishing and using even destructive fishing practices. If you can believe it, there are things out there called marine protected areas that technically allow for bottom trawling. And we know that bottom trawling has this incredibly destructive impact on ecosystems that's long lasting. That can't be reversed easily. So, that's not protection. That seems like a misnomer to call that a marine protected area. So these are we're looking for much stricter regulations. Now, blue parks, some blue parks allow for certain amount of community or subsistence fishing, local fishing, but these are, using gear types and at scales that are not so destructive, that we know to be more sustainable.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of right rules, and then right management. That one really encompasses a whole lot. So this involves, not only having a management team and a management plan with goals set out, so that, and then being able to measure progress towards those goals, so that if your goals aren't being met, that maybe you need to change something about the regulations or about your management activities because you're not meeting your goals. And so all of that goes into management, but it also includes what we've learned more recently about marine protected areas, maybe in my field, is that people matter, right? And this seems intuitive, but maybe scientists some of us have been a little, I'll speak for myself, have been a little late to the party on that one, about recognizing how important it is for local communities to have a sense of stewardship and have an engagement in these marine protected areas. Because of course, if communities are not engaged, then they have no reason to sort of respect these protected areas, right? This is all about people. And because you're in the sense that you're regulating people's activities. And so people need to be engaged in that. Absolutely. So in any case, sort of all of those different pieces come together. We write these very extensive evaluation reports, and also involved in the evaluation is actually an international council of marine scientists and marine protected area experts that review each nominee for the Blue Park Award.
Wow. So I noticed, of course, I'm located in Florida, so I'm looking at which ones in the U.S. Got this award. So I noticed that there's only two. Hawaii, one that I can't pronounce.
We can work on it if you like.
And in California, the Channel Islands.
Yes.
And so, of course, I always think about the Florida Reef. And when you talked about dredging and things, it just reminded me that they actually approved to dredge out a whole area for larger cruise ships, which is like the last thing that we need on the Florida Reef. And they were actually like dredging out parts of coral to make the area, which is awful. So obviously, in Florida, we're not doing well when it comes to protecting our area. So I'm wondering, because we're under the same government as these other two in the U.S., right. What do you think maybe are some takeaways that we could take from Hawaii or California that might work for us here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So,
sorry, I know that's like a really big question.
Yeah, that is a really big question. I mean, so here are a couple of thoughts. So as we already discussed, the rules matter, right? Mm-hmm. And in both of those cases, so the Hawaii Marine Protected Area that you are referencing is Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. And then we have Channel Islands. In both of those cases, those two marine protected areas have stronger regulations, more protective regulations than many of the other U.S. federal marine protected areas around the country. And in both cases, I think you can point to the engagement of communities to have made that happen. And so, I think there is a really important, the ways that national marine sanctuaries become designated in the U.S. Involves a huge amount of community input. You can't become you don't get a national marine sanctuary without a huge sort of groundswell of community support for it. And so I think that you probably, the path forward is through building community support and demanding leaders and legislators sort of do better. It does help to create alliances, right, amongst community leaders on the one hand, scientists on another hand, to be able to build the sort of scientific case for why this is important and what kinds of different outcomes and impacts you would see with better protection versus less protection. And I think sort of putting those pieces together, and then folks who really understand the politics and the legislative process to get there, sort of putting together that coalition of policy folks, community motivation, and the scientific backdrop is really key. Those are some of the pieces that we're putting together for a campaign to get protections for California seamounts out here on the West Coast. And so it's another project of Marine Conservation Institute's anyway. So
yeah, and I think
science.
But the important takeaway I really got from that is that it does take a community, and I think a lot of people think that their voice doesn't matter or they can't help make a change. But it really does matter. I see people
it's so key.
Yeah, from like Florida Surf Rider, they're always going to Tallahassee, which is where people lobby here in Florida. Yeah. We recently tried to pass the sunscreen bill for no oxybenzone in the Florida Keys. And I was, at those hearings, and, they ended up overturning it here in Florida once it got farther up. I'm definitely not a government expert, but once it got up there,
it didn't get all the way through. Yeah.
And, it's hard, but you have to think that even though that didn't pass now, it still got people's attention. People are thinking about it, and maybe the next time it will.
That's right. You're laying the groundwork, and you look for, and this is why you really need those alliances between the folks who understand the policy and the government systems, as well as the folks who understand the scientific arguments and then all of that community engagement, because you need to have the right policy window sometimes, and that doesn't come around every time, and you may strike out sometimes, but there are other shots. And so you kind of keep working at it and keep building those coalitions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to hear about what your specific role is at the Institute.
Absolutely. So as I said, I was brought on to really launch the Blue Parks program and the Blue Park Awards. And so that has happened. And I coordinate the program. So that involves not only coordinating, receiving nominations for Blue Park Awards and getting going on pulling together all the information we need to complete the evaluation, writing up the evaluation report. I also have a lot of colleagues working with me on those and interns and all sorts of folks who work on those pieces. But we also recognized that by creating these criteria that are rooted in the science of what makes a good marine protected area, we were creating the gold standard, the benchmark, the definition of what are the pieces you need to be successful for a marine protected area. These criteria are a blueprint for becoming an effective marine protected area, or a blue park, what we call a blue park. So we started having some MPA planners and MPA champions approach us and say, hey, we're working on a new marine protected area, or we're working to upgrade this existing marine protected area. We want it to be effective. We want to be in line for a Blue Park Award at some point. Can you give us some pointers on how to get there? And we realized that that this was a really important opportunity to help more MPAs reach this standard that we want them to reach. We'd given them the incentive with this award, but we needed to also, or there was an opportunity to also help MPA planners get there and MPA managers get there. So we've started consulting with a number of different groups, and we're calling these our Blue Sparks, or our Blue Spark collaborations, because of course they're the Blue Sparks are on the road to becoming Blue Parks. And so this is we're really excited about this, because between, first of all, creating that incentive for governments to get to effective protections, and then helping show them how to get there, consulting with individual planners and projects around the world to try to help them get there. We really see the potential to build this kind of network, a global network of marine protected areas that have the power to safeguard marine wildlife and conserve biodiversity in the ocean. So that is, I spend a lot of my time on a day-to-day, bouncing between learning about a new marine protected area and either evaluating it for a potential award or for a potential collaboration. Reaching out to our numerous partners. I mean, we could not have launched this program. We're a fairly small organization. And the only way this Blue Parks program works is through a myriad of collaborations, work with other nonprofits and NGOs who work on marine conservation, and individuals, corporations, I mean, all of it, right? So I spend a lot of my time sort of coordinating with a lot of our colleagues. And then also, of course, with our Science Council members who are doing the review of each nominee as we go along. So there's a lot in there, and I, have my hand in all of it. That is one of the things I love about working at Marine Conservation Institute. I mean, on one hand, because we're a small organization, sometimes it feels like, oh gosh, there's not enough time and money to do all the things to grow the program as big as we want to immediately. But there's all of this opportunity to collaborate with all of our partners. And at a small organization, I get to wear many hats. So I'm working on everything from updating our website to making presentations, with colleagues internationally, to sitting down and writing up, well-researched evaluation reports for nominees.
That's awesome, though. I feel like it probably helps keep the spark alive to be doing something different all the time.
It does. There is never a dull moment. I am never sitting around going, what should I do next?
How many people work at the Institute?
We have about 10 staff members. And then, we have a number of volunteers who work with us and sometimes sort of short-term contractors who work with us. And then, as I said, we sort of partner with a lot of other organizations as well in many different areas that we work in. So.
I love how collaborative you guys are. I recently heard someone say that, if everyone worked more on trying to work together towards the common goal of marine conservation rather than everyone trying to be a founder and do their own thing, we would get farther
ahead.
As someone who, just sort of founded something for that, I was like, oh, you're so right, but I guess, my niche is sort of the diving group, trying to extend
Absolutely.
Group. So, but, collaborating.
And we need these conduits, communicators like yourself. I often find that I think I'm doing a good job of stripping jargon out of my language, but telling stories is not my strongest suit. And so I find that working with, communicators like yourself is so enlightening to me. And I learn so much when I do about, how to more effectively communicate our programs and our aims and all of that. And so that's the joy of all of this collaboration, is that I get to learn a lot along the way as well and really stretch myself. But we need, I think the communication end of things is maybe where we need the most work. As many scientists will tell you, sure, there are always more questions to sort of pursue, but we know enough to know what we need to be doing. We know enough to make the decisions about conserving marine wildlife, about how to create good marine protected areas. We know enough to act, and we need to be acting. And the way to act is to be able to communicate that need to communities and to leaders and to governments. So your work is really, really key, I think, to doing a good job on marine conservation.
Well, thank you. I might not know all the jargon, but I can host a podcast. So I guess that helps.
Yeah, that's needed. That's really needed.
Cool. So I do have one more question just about the awarded blue parks that you guys have.
Sure.
So if you had one that just really stands out and you think is doing probably, the best in the whole world.
Oh my goodness.
Which one do you think that would be?
The top of the top. Oh my goodness.
What can you aspire to?
There is, wow. I can't choose one. I will say that each of them have these amazing stories behind them. And I will admit right now that, we're trying to do better at telling those stories. Again, that's not my strongest suit. So this is an area that I am reaching out to collaborators to help me on for sure. But we're trying to tell those stories because they are so compelling. And these are our ocean optimism stories, right? The places that are getting it right and that we should hold up as models for all of us. You're exactly right. So I will say that one of the first marine protected areas that I started learning about in these evaluations that I was really captivated by was Tubataha Reefs National Park in the Philippines. This MPA is just incredible. And it was the first time that I was really, one of the first times that I was really reaching out to management teams and asking them for information. And I was trying to make it as, easy for them to respond and get me information as possible. But I also wanted to do a deep dive and understand their management planning processes and their enforcement and what they had going on. And I learned about Angelique Sanko, who's has been the manager for many years now at Tubataha Reefs, which is also an incredible dive site. You may be familiar with it. She is known as lovingly as Mama Ranger. She is as I said, the manager of Tubataha Reefs, and she's just incredible. And she has so much energy. And she, not only is recognized now internationally for managing this big, beautiful coral reef ecosystem in the Philippines, but is also so accessible and easy to talk with. And she was so helpful as I was not only asking her for information, but still figuring out how to make the process work. And probably not as efficient as I am maybe now at asking for information and figuring out how to get it all done. So that one stands out in my mind. Another story that I love to tell is a story from Indonesia, the Mazul Private Marine Reserve. I may be messing up the full name. Mazul is also an incredible dive site that you may have heard of in Indonesia, in the Raja Ampat region. And this is a place that has married an eco resort and sort of dive tourism with funding, management and enforcement of a really strong marine protected area there. So they've figured out that they've successfully married that sort of financial benefit of having an intact, beautiful, resilient marine ecosystem with being able to maintain that and sustain that. And this is a place that had been really overfished. There was a lot of shark finning. There was hunting for manta rays. And what the sort of program there has done, it's this really sort of integrated program on the foundation side of the eco resort. It's not just about sort of setting up rules and regulations, but about engaging that community. Again, it's really all about the community in seeing the value of leaving manta rays and sharks in the water in this ecosystem and creating jobs around, it's a lot of the former manta ray hunters that are now the park rangers, and creating an educational program there for the youth in the community that involves education around this marine reserve and the ecosystem there. So it's a cool sort of story about the marine reserve there becoming this sort of community foundation and the basis for the economy in a positive conservation way.
That's so neat. I feel like I have to go there now. I love that. Everyone in the dive community likes to say that, sharks especially sharks, are worth millions of dollars alive, whereas they're only worth a couple thousand dead.
Right. That is so true. And I know that is an argument. I think that it's kind of helped support the designation and the ongoing management of some of the great marine protected areas in the Eastern Tropical Pacific as well. Another little story that comes out of the Blue Parks program are these Eastern Tropical Pacific marine protected areas that are all connected by particularly shark populations. And so that involves Malpelo in Colombia, Cocos in Costa Rica, and Galapagos in Ecuador, and even Revillagigedo, which is not yet a blue park, but nominated for a blue park up in Mexico. There's an organization of marine scientists these sharks and learning about their connections and their use of these various marine protected areas, all of which are really strong, well-protected areas. So that's another really cool story. In fact, Micromar has a campaign to protect one of the swimways between these marine protected areas called Microvia. It's just become a hope spot by Mission Blue. Wow. That's so cool. I feel like... And those are all amazing shark diving locations, of course.
Yeah. Are you guys taking notes here about all the different places we're going to go dive when quarantine's over?
Exactly.
That's awesome. So what is the best way for our listeners to help support Marine Conservation Institute?
Well, I would say, there are so many ways to be engaged in marine protected areas writ large to support the overarching goal of more better marine protection to safeguard marine biodiversity. And so, we were just mentioning, if you do travel to go diving outside of COVID times, choose these great ones. Choose the blue parks as your destination. Support really good marine conservation efforts. And if you're going to places that are not blue parks, ask them about blue parks. If you're out and you have connections with rangers and managers and dive masters as you're out in these places, let them know about the Blue Parks program. I would love your help in sort of spreading the word about blue parks to managers and places that don't yet know about the program and know about the awards. For folks who live near the ocean, find out about your local marine protected areas. Would they qualify for blue parks? Maybe they should be nominated next. And all marine protected areas, as we've been talking about, the best marine protected areas out there have strong community support. So find ways of getting engaged in your own local marine protected area. There are a myriad of ways to volunteer. Many marine protected areas have advisory councils of community members that you can serve on. You can volunteer as a scientific diver often and help them with their ecological monitoring. You can volunteer with cleanups. You can volunteer with educational outreach opportunities. If you take photographs, underwater photographs, I know that marine protected area managers, that's one of the ways that we can communicate with folks who don't get under the surface to show them that life that exists there and why that marine protected area is so necessary, what it's protecting down there. So those are, so many ways you can get involved in your local marine protected areas and spread the word about blue parks. You can follow Marine Conservation Institute on our sort of social media channels or sign up for our newsletters and spread the word about blue parks and our other programs to safeguard marine biodiversity around the world. And then, of course, you can always support our program and all of our our work by making a donation at marine-conservation.org. Again, if you're interested in learning more specifically about the Blue Parks program or how to nominate a marine protected area for a Blue Park Award, you can go to blueparks.org. All one word, blueparks.org. That'll take you to the right page on the Marine Conservation Institute website. And let's see, on Twitter and Instagram, we are at Saving Oceans, all one word. And on Facebook and LinkedIn, you can just find us at Marine Conservation Institute.
And I'll link all of that stuff in the description about this.
Awesome.
You can find it easily. I know that you guys have a kindness quiz going on right now for the summer.
Yeah.
A little bit about
oh goodness, I should have prepped a little bit more on the kindness quiz. But so this is a sort of a fun way to engage with us and learn some more about our programs while also taking a little quiz and learning more about your own kindness profile. For everyone who takes the kindness quiz, we get a small donation, and you get to learn a little bit more about our programs and about things that you sort of as part of the quiz, you identify areas that you are particularly interested in, issues that you're particularly interested in, and you get back some information about programs that align with your interests.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'll also link that in the description because that's pretty fun. Do you have anything else that you guys want to shout out that you're doing that the listeners can help support?
Well, so I was thinking about the fact that, right now nobody's traveling and there's not as much diving happening right now. Another way that you can get involved right now that doesn't involve sort of getting out into the water necessarily is, being part of building these kinds of coalitions of support for marine protected areas, for better conservation. And so Marine Conservation Institute often has various petitions and letter writing campaigns and things going on. You can check out on our website, again, at marine-conservation.org, some of the things we have going on right now. We have a Sea Mountaineers pledge for folks interested. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a campaign to protect California's seamounts. And as part of that, we have a lot of information to learn about seamounts, these really amazing, fragile ecosystems that, with corals that grow for hundreds of years, et cetera. So that is a pledge that you can take. And there's a cool Sea Mountaineers badge that you can receive as being part of that. There's also a 30 by 30 campaign letter, scientist letter to sign on to. This is supporting protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030, which is a big push right now. So those are sort of other ways, and you can learn about additional ways of getting involved in all of our different programs, again, on our website.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to see what you guys do next. It's been so awesome talking to you today, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you back on, just, to hear about your next project. So
that sounds great.
Awesome. That's a wrap. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast and learned some valuable information about the journey of conservation. This is a constant process of learning, growth, and understanding, so I look forward to chatting with Sarah again. Please leave a review if you can and go to www.eco-consciousdiver.com to check out all other podcasts, resources, and everything we've got going on there. See you next week.